Welcome to the Law, Your Money, and You. I'm Roberta, Saphire, an attorney in New England.
And I'm Camille, Barron, a financial coordinator also in New England. And so, Roberta, today we have a very interesting guest who's been here before. And this is someone who's going to be talking with us about some very interesting topics in the law, including mock trials.
Yeah, and of all the attorneys that we have had, I have to say this is one of the most informed, dedicated, and delightful to have. Welcome, welcome, welcome. This is Gary Bloom. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Thank you. I'm a IP attorney currently out of Beacon Hill in Boston.
And what's IP for our...
Intellectual property.
Okay.
And before going into intellectual property, I was a software engineer for a long time.
Interesting change. What made you decide to make that change?
I wanted to feel better about the work I did, and I decided to transition into law so I could help people with their legal matters.
Interesting. Intellectual property.
Yes,
That's the
ma'am.
specialty.
Yep.
Do you need a special exam for that? Like, as opposed to just passing the bar?
There's different areas of intellectual property. For patent law, if you want to help inventors with their get patents for their inventions, you need a special license from the United States Patent and Trademark Office. And to get that license, you need to have a science or technical background, and then you need to sit for and pass an exam.
Oh, we're going to say that for another show.
Okay.
Patent law.
Because we've done a show on that already.
Well, it was copyright, patent, but we'll get into that. Here today, he's going to talk about mock trials, and it's without the New England accent. It's mock.
M-O-C-K.
Mock or mark, not mark.
Not
it's
M-A-R-K.
mock.
Mock trials,
Mock
yes.
trials.
So what is a mock trial?
So a mock trial is essentially a procedure that mimics an actual courtroom trial. The intent is to, depending on what you're trying to achieve, to imitate as closely as possible what would actually happen in a real courtroom.
And what is the purpose of having these mock trials?
Well, it depends. The mock trials are very prevalent nowadays in the school system. Most people know mock trials from law school or colleges, but they actually go down as early as grade school. Grade schoolers can have mock trials based on fairy tales. So, the big bad wolf who blew down the house, well, he could be on trial for something. And that's what the grade schoolers might have a mock trial on.
That's
No kidding.
fantastic.
Wow.
That's fantastic.
But it's really all about exposing everyone to the legal system. Because for many, the legal system is a great unknown, and it can be very scary. So it's an opportunity to introduce people at a younger age to our legal system.
Interesting.
Well, I know they have mock trials competition
They do.
in colleges, and not necessarily law schools, like you said.
Correct.
But tell us more about your experiences with mock trials, or whatever you want to tell us.
Sure. So I've had two experiences with mock trials so far. One, when I was working in law school, I took a trial advocacy class, and in that trial advocacy class, I got to participate in 3 different mock trials. Twice as a witness, actually the defendant in a murder case and in a rape case, and the third time I got to be the prosecutor for the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, prosecuting a murder case.
So you had both sides of a murder case.
Yes.
And what was that like?
It was
To be
fantastic.
both, I mean.
It was very interesting, but it's just so realistic,
Really?
and it's just so fun to get to speak to the jury and question the other side and poke holes in their story and exploit the weaknesses of their case. It's a lot of fun.
So if you were let's say you were doing a mock trial for the same case, and then first you were the defense and then you were the prosecutor, how do you think your position and your whole your approach would be different?
Well, it's a great question. Part of being a litigator, or part of being a lawyer in general, is understanding both sides of the case. Theoretically, you need to be able to argue both sides of the case anyways. Reason being, you need to be aware of the other side's strongest points, their strongest issues, so that you can counter them. So, and in other ways too, sometimes you want to be the one who introduces the other side's strong points to kind of take away their thunder when they try to introduce it themselves. So in other words, you introduce it and then you kind of show how it doesn't really matter after all, as compared to letting them say how it's so important. But it's all about persuasion.
In these competitions, I would think that they would examine the jurors afterwards to find out how they did. Did you have that too?
No, it really depends. So the point of mock trials in general, as far as the educational system goes, not so much for real attorneys, which we'll talk about in a moment, but in the educational system, it's really about checking and seeing how well the students, the participants, perform. And that's really more about scoring them as they give their opening, as they give their direct examination or cross-examination of the other guy's witness.
So who scores them? Just the teacher or of everybody?
Well, it depends. If it's a formal competition, there are typically 2 or 3 judges who will score the participants as they go along. And then at the end, you tally the scores to see which team wins. So it's not whether or not, theoretically, you could be the defense and your defendant could be convicted of a crime, but you could still win the mock trial competition because you performed better than the other side.
I was a judge in a mock trial. It was a nationwide, but they held it at Brandeis, and we had to score, not so much score, but comment. They wanted our comments.
Yep.
Like I think it was 3 judges, and they wanted our comments on each person, how they did, because then they would change it over. I mean, one who thought, you would say, well, you didn't talk enough, or you didn't, did you have any where you couldn't hear the witness because they talk so soft?
In my personal experience, we didn't have that. When in our 3 mock trials, we're in a regular courtroom, and nobody spoke so softly we couldn't hear them.
Oh, well, that's good.
But if they had, I'm sure their mock attorney would have asked them to speak up, because it's all about the jury, right? It's always about convincing the jury that your side of the story is the right one, and if they can't hear you, you can't convince them of anything.
Right.
Now, I had mentioned before, there's 2 kind of main reasons why people do mock trials. One is scholastically, to educate and perform. The other is sometimes lawyers hold their own mock trials before an important case. As an attorney, you will always prepare your witness before taking the stand. You'll always go through what questions you would ask, the topics that'll cover, the topics you expect the other side will cross-examine them on. You'll always go through that. So that in itself isn't a complete mock trial, but maybe you want to do that in a courtroom setting. So you might question your witness and have people, mock jurors, sitting there listening, and then you can ask them afterwards, were you convinced? Did you like the witness? Was he convincing? Was he trustworthy? Is he someone you'd want to find that he's telling the truth? That's really, so lawyers use mock trials themselves as a means to gauge how strong or weak their case is and how well they can argue it. And in those situations, you probably would ask the jury afterwards, the mock jurors, what do you think? What could have been better? What could have been worse? What would have made you believe? What would have made you find? Did you find for us? If you didn't, what would have made you find for us?
Ah, interesting.
Good tool.
And you mentioned in the scholastic system, when we had our mock trials, the basic portions of a mock trial, at least in law school, are, you might have some preliminary motions, then you have an opening, examination, cross-examination of witnesses, and a closing. So we went through that process. And then when each whole mock trial was done, the professor polled the jurors to say, and all the people from the class saying, let's talk about this person's opening. What did you all think? Let's talk about this person's, the other person's opening. What did you think? They basically polled everyone to get feedback on each stage of the mock trial, because you might be great at openings and closings because it's just you talking. You may not be as good at examining or cross-examining a witness. They're different skills. So the whole idea of the scholastic, in the scholastic system, you want to get that feedback so you can tell people what they need to improve on, and right then and there, and try and improve their game, so to speak.
And then that also, I'm sure, helps you, or helps any attorney to better prepare their witnesses when the time comes they're actually doing the trial, right? Because if you find out some of your weak spots and things that you were good at, you want to impart some of that knowledge to the witness as well. Right.
The last thing you ever want to be, and it always happens anyways, you never want to be surprised by your own witness at trial. If you asked him beforehand what color was the car, and he said the car was blue, and on the stand he says it was green, you didn't prepare your witness well enough.
Yeah.
Now, it may come at cross-examination when the other side is asking him questions. Stuff may come up that you weren't ready for, and you need to be able to handle that.
Yeah.
But even then, hopefully a witness isn't going to say something that's surprising or contradicts something he had told you before. That's
Is there a
good.
discovery process, a pretrial discovery process, where you're entitled to know something about what the other side intends to do, and vice versa?
Well, in a mock trial, typically what will happen in a mock trial is that the entity organizing the trial, the mock trial, will give you a big packet of information. It'll say, these are the facts of the case. This is, some preliminary hearing testimony that was recovered. Here are some reports, whether it's a police report or some interview that was documented. They'll give you 99% of what you need, and they might point you to the federal rules of evidence or, the local rules of evidence.
Yeah, you might point out too, in a real case, you might have a year or two of depositions and what they call interrogatories, and they might have it, and it would be unfair to unload that on your mock trial participants too much.
It really depends, right, on
Yeah.
how quickly you need to get this mock trial implemented,
Oh,
assuming
yeah,
you're a practicing lawyer, how dedicated your mock jurors are, and how dedicated everyone is. If it's a multi-million-dollar trial and you only
Oh,
have a couple
yeah.
months to prepare for it, you make the time, you find the time, and you get it done.
Yeah. There's a lot of pressure in that respect,
A lot
too,
of pressure,
isn't there?
yep.
Yeah.
But it can make for a much better outcome. Much better outcome.
I have to say, my daughter and her husband are personal injury attorneys in
Excellent personal injury attorneys.
Arizona. Yeah, thank you. But they're on. You have to be certified somehow as a thing. They do those mock trials all the time. I told them that we were having a guest on, and they said it's very important out there. And they belong to this group that's kind of like all over the country. And very, very important. Mock trials you're going to hear more and more of. The public will be hearing more and more of.
Sure. Just one other thing I want to mention, too. Some people hear the term mock trial. They also hear the term moot court.
Oh,
and they're like,
yeah.
oh, what is moot court? So mock trial is basically you're mimicking a lower court trial. And moot court is when you mimic an appellate court hearing. So there's no examination of witnesses. There's really no openings and closings. It's
Tell the viewers what appellate court is as opposed to.
So basically, you have an issue, go to court. If you lose, and you want to appeal, you end up in the appellate court.
That makes sense.
And so when you appeal a lost case, you don't get to say your whole case all over again. It's really about someone made an error. The judge made an error of law. He wouldn't allow me to enter some evidence that he should have, and I believe that was wrong. So I would appeal that, and that issue of whether that evidence was really admissible or not would go to the appellate court. And if the appellate court finds that that evidence was admissible, then you get another shot, another bite at the apple as far as your original
That's
judgment.
good.
Interesting. And this could be either civil or criminal cases,
Yes.
mock trials?
Yeah, my mock trials were all criminal. They were so much fun. So much fun.
And you were both defense and then you were also prosecutor
Yes,
in
ma'am.
those. Must have
Yes.
been quite an interesting
It
change
was.
to see both sides like that.
It was fun, particularly fun for me because I was the class bad guy. So I was basically always the defendant in all the mock trials. I was the defendant. So
So
You were-
end up being the prosecutor. We give some examples of civil as opposed to criminal.
well, I mean, you can have a mock trial on anything. So your niece and nephew, they're personal injury attorneys. So they could have a mock trial as on considering from plaintiff's side.
Correction, daughter and son-in-law.
Sorry.
That's okay. But
So-
I have other relatives that are aspiring, either wannabe lawyers, and I know lots
Sure.
of wannabe lawyers.
But they would probably have a mock trial on a personal injury case.
Yes.
Right? And they would do
yes.
plaintiff side. And they would get people to fill in for the defense side and all the witnesses, and they would probably have their witnesses would be in the mock trial, and they would probably get other people to play the other side's witnesses, and they would try to they would want the mock trial to be as realistic as possible because sometimes people get nervous when they go into court, especially if, it's new for them. They're not used to being up on the stand. They're not used to being sworn in and asked questions. Mock trial is also a great way to get your witness and your client exposed to the legal system without all the pressure of actually being on trial or in a trial at that time.
So they would have their actual clients as part of the mock trial?
They probably would, yes. It really depends what they're trying to exercise. If they're trying to exercise their entire case, they would probably have all their witnesses and their clients involved in the mock trial. But maybe, let's just say they just wanted to exercise their expert witness. They wouldn't necessarily need their own client.
Yeah.
They could do a mock trial and just have their expert show up. But that's less likely because experts are so expensive. And just as a side note too, there's two different types of witnesses. There are expert witnesses, and they testify about their expertise in some foundation. But there's also what they call a fact or a lay or a percipient witness. And that person testifies about what they know, what they saw, what they heard, because they were there. You know, so those are the two different types of witnesses. Fact witnesses who were there, or an expert witness who wasn't there, but he has so much knowledge that he's going to be able to give an expert opinion on what happened. So the fact witness might say, I saw the car run through the red light, and the expert might be the one to testify about how the crash was reconstructed, and based on the skid marks and the damage to the vehicles, this person was going this fast, and you know, so that's kind of a difference between a fact witness and an expert witness.
How long does a mock trial last, average, or it's all different?
As long as you need,
Yeah.
you know. In a competition, they have time limits on how long you have for an opening, how long you have for examination and re-examination, and how long you have for closings and such. They try to limit the amount of total time so that, you know, it doesn't get completely out of hand. So it might be that you could do a mock trial excluding objections in maybe a couple hours, maybe 2 to 3 hours.
Now, how many people would be on a jury in a mock trial? We haven't talked about jurors and how many.
So the jurors
people
don't play as
this.
important a role in a mock trial, but you know, usually you want to have somewhere between 6 and 12 jurors. But you can have more, you can have less. It doesn't really matter.
Oh
Depends
yeah,
on
the
what
more you have, the more opinions
Exactly,
you have.
exactly.
Yeah.
And it can be fun at the end, you know, even in a scholastic setting, to poll your jurors and just say, hey, who would you have found for?
Yeah.
You know, I was the prosecutor. I have to convince all of you guys. But if I'm the
Yeah.
defense, I only have to convince one of you guys. Right?
Oh,
Because
yeah.
you need a unanimous jury to convict, at least
But
in
not for,
in our mocks. But not in civil, but in,
Yeah, how many do you need in civil? We haven't
really
even
de-
got
it
in there.
depends. It really
depends on the case
Yeah.
and how many they need. It's interesting.
that's interesting. And, you know, when you have these cases where there's a hung jury, it could just be one who disagrees, right? It could be just one who doesn't
Well,
agree with the others.
I know in civil it's different. I have to tell you the truth. I never did a jury trial. I don't think I would want to either. I wonder if they do mock trials with just the judge.
You can have that's what they call a bench trial. A bench trial doesn't have a jury.
Oh.
You can have a mock bench trial as well.
That's interesting. And how many, what else should we know about mock trials? I mean, it seems to be dig in here. I'm fascinated by the
Sure.
by the school trials.
So the collegiate system is national. There's an association, American Mock Trial Association, I think,
Really?
is responsible for all the college mock trials. So they lay down, they give the cases, they lay down rules and foundations. I believe the high school level, that's run by the state bar administrations of each state, so they can vary. And you know, there's really no competitions or organizations or associations with middle school or junior high school. It's really when they get into college where things get really serious. I mean, they take mock trials seriously in high school as well, but it's like really when you get to college, I think, is where it's the biggest deal.
Law school to college and
Yeah,
law school?
and law school as well,
especially
sure.
law school.
But like, you know, Harvard and the University of Virginia, I think, were in the last 2 years, they were the two schools that found their way into the collegiate finals. And this year, the University of Virginia beat Harvard. The year before, Harvard beat University of Virginia. So, you know, there's a good rivalry going on there.
Really?
Yeah.
And for cases that are done in mock trials, like for actual cases, are there certain law firms? I know you're in the Boston area. Like, do you find that there are certain ones who tend to use it more than others?
I haven't really been exposed to it as far as a law firm setting. You know, the cost of a mock trial can be
Expensive.
high.
Yeah.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
It really depends.
sure.
You know, you have a lot of people. You know, everyone's hourly, right? You have if you get a lot of attorneys involved, it can be a lot of cost. It really depends. At the end of the day, it's going to depend on the value of the case. Does the value of the case justify more than just witness preparation does it justify a mock trial. And if the value of the case is high enough, I'm sure that any decent firm would consider at least having a mock trial.
I wonder if the firm, say it's an accident case, I wonder if the firm wants it gotten around that they do the mock trials, because they could have somebody spy, so to speak, and say, this is what they're
that's a good
doing, this is
point.
what their case is.
So whether or not the mock trial is open or closed, mock trials are probably closed. But if other firms knew that a particular firm did run through mock trials, I think that says something for the firm that's willing to do the mock trial. It shows a level of dedication, a level of preparation that should be respected. Because I mean, usually when you go to court, it's not always about who's right or wrong, it's really about who's the best prepared.
Right, right. Preparation, preparation, and preparation. But like a lot of these, like automobile cases, which are called torts, it's usually you're suing the other person, but it's an insurance company that comes in and defends. Do you think with insurance companies don't have the greatest names, unless you like the commercials, but do you think, would you put it past them to get one of their people to infiltrate one of the mock trials?
You're talking almost of legal espionage.
Yeah, yeah, there you go.
I
That's
really
not
cannot
illegal,
comment
is it?
on that.
It's not illegal to happen to be this or that. That's not illegal. Do you see what would be illegal about it?
I really can't comment on that. I can neither confirm nor deny any such statement.
I can picture insurance companies doing that. I know, aren't there like insurance companies who you have like your statute of limitations to bring suit, and they will stall you and say, well, don't bring suit. How can you bring suit? We're talking about it. That's why you used to say, bring suit first and then talk to them.
That is usually the best way to go. You always have to be aware of your statutes of limitations. You know, once the clock starts running, you need to be aware of it. And nothing against insurance companies, but any defendant would probably be happy to forestall the other side from filing and making them miss their filing deadline.
Now, when it comes to finding for or finding against, how about in terms of the award of damages? Are they also asked to figure out how much the damages should be?
If you're willing to go to that level in your mock trial, you can ask the jurors to, provide what they would consider a reasonable damage award. You know, and you would do it. If your mock trial is good, you would have your mock judge give the jury instructions, just like a real judge would. They would go in. The jury would go and deliberate and come back with a holding. And if they find for the plaintiff, to come up with a damage award and then justify it with the appropriate paperwork, just like a real jury would. I mean, what better way to get a feel for how well your case would really do at trial?
Sure. No, because then there's a whole thing about punitive damages and whether or not there should be any, or if so, how much should there be?
It really
You've got to be thinking
depends.
about future income loss and those sorts of things. There's a lot
Boy,
of...
well, that's your insurance.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot to think about. You know, I'm sure there's going to be formulas to figure out some of those things, like future loss of income and those
And
sorts of things.
If you go into trial, say someone's been injured and they claim they're going to be out of work for the rest of their life, you're probably going to have an economist expert come in and say, this person was making this much money, he's this disabled, he'll never be able to work again. So to make him whole, he's going to need this lump sum, which over the course of his life would give him the income that he would have earned if he had been working.
Yeah,
And that's another example of where you would use an expert witness.
sure. Yes. So you've done several of these now, two or three?
I've been involved with 3 mock trials while in law school, which was so much fun. I think I mentioned that. I'll mention it again. So much fun. And then recently I also got involved with some folks from MIT who are trying to promote some new technology. And what's really interesting is they want to promote this technology not through advertising, not through marketing, but through a mock trial. Because they
how is
realize
that?
that mock trials are so popular and they are so prevalent throughout all different grades in the scholastic system that it would be an interesting way to promote the use of this technology.
That's a you've got to be kidding. Because who would think, who would think that they would use a mock trial for that? Can you tell us more about this?
Just
as much as you can.
Sure. I mean, the underlying technology itself isn't really so relevant, but it's the first time I've ever heard of engineers and scientists looking at using a mock trial to promote technology.
Absolutely.
Now, they haven't invented this technology, but they want to promote its use because they think it can really be revolutionary, can really change the financial world. And they believe that mock trials are so popular and prevalent, they're an excellent way to do this. The other reason they want to they're looking at using mock trials to promote the use of this technology is they figure at some point someone's going to litigate, and it's going to involve the use of this technology. And by doing a mock trial, it gives them also the opportunity to say, okay, how would we present this technology at trial? Would we be able to use a regular fact witness, or would we need an expert? You know, what would the experts say about the technology so that the jurors will understand it, right? Because that's a really tough part about going to trial when things are very technical. You're talking about all this technical stuff that the jurors, they're not engineers, they don't understand. So you have to be able to explain the technology in simple enough terms so that people can understand it. Regular people in the jury
and
can
they're not
understand
going to use just engineers on the as jurists.
That wouldn't be fair, right?
No.
Most jurors aren't engineers.
Right.
So they need to be able to take the technology and make it simple, explain it simply enough so that non-engineering people, non-technical people would understand at least the basic concept of what it means and what it does. And so this is one of the things they're looking at. So they're kind of attacking two different things at the same time, promoting the use of the technology and also kind of preparing for how it might be one day litigated.
Interesting.
That's
Well, I think that's something that
fascinating.
we could be talking about in our next segment. We'll talk about this technology as a live
as
example
on
of how mock
patent
trials can be used.
Yeah, that is really fascinating. I know you're coming back to, in the near future to talk about patent law.
Looking
but
forward to it.
is that a patent law situation or copyright, or what would you call that new technology?
So the new technology already exists. It's not technology that would be patented. If there are patents out on it, they've already been achieved.
Interesting, huh? Let me ask another thing. Mock trial, is there anything out, like how to conduct a mock trial that can be patented or something like that? Or is that just our format to follow?
More likely, if you wrote a book on how to conduct a book or a paper on how to conduct a mock trial, it would be copyrighted, protected by copyright registration.
Can I bring up, because we're almost near the end of the show, and you've done such a thorough job that I know we're going to get calls from people on how they can participate in a mock trial, how much money they can expect to things, which the answer is all that. But we have, and I think when you were on the show last you talked about it, we have accomplished more books on our police officers are our friends. And these are some of the towns. I mean, if you just, the back, someone said the back tells the story. Each one is custom made. Look at these backs and flags, especially today with flags and diversity. So these are copyrighted, is that it?
You could register the copyright on these pamphlets because they're works of authorship.
What's copyrighted on it, the whole thing?
You would copyright the whole thing, and that would include, you know, all the images, all the games, you know.
So each one separately, or the
No,
whole
you would
idea?
just copyright the whole book. Register for copyright the whole book, and then, you know, they would include every page in the book. And if anyone were to copy the page, or make something that's very substantially similar that they copied, then they would be liable for copyright infringement.
Oh, good. We'll have you handle the case.
Happy to help.
Are we expecting something?
No, we just want to let everybody know everywhere that police officers are our friends, and patent lawyers too.
Thank you.
Like
Thank you
Gary
very much
Bloom.
for being
My
on the
pleasure.
show.
Yeah.
We'll look forward to the next segment.
As do I,
and-
as
and
do I.
This is what's called a wrap.
All right.
Wrap
Thank you.
it up.
And for folks who would like more information on mock
Yes.
trials, we would love to hear from you, because remember, this is your show. The law, your money,
And
You.